Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
How busy you are. Thank
Great
you.
to be here.
We appreciate it. First of all, let me get your reaction to the terrible apparent terrorist attack in Manchester.
Well, it's appalling. Young people with their families out enjoying their evening. So many victims, so many wounded. I'm confident the U.S. will stand by our ally. And of course, this just demonstrates how significant the threat is and how important it is that we cooperate with our allies on intelligence, counterterrorism efforts, and continue to take it to ISIS in Syria and Iraq.
Yeah, ISIS has claimed responsibility. Apparently there's no firm connection yet between the 22-year-old suicide bomber and ISIS. But what's the strategy in your mind to combat ISIS?
Well, it's two-pronged. In Syria and Iraq, by applying U.S. air power in coordination with local partners such as the Kurds and the very limited deployment of U.S. Special Operations Forces, we can continue to roll back ISIS's control on territory. Then you've got the question of preventing terrorist attacks such as this one in Manchester here at home and within the territory of our allies. That requires intelligence sharing, joint police operations, and an effective counterterrorism program here and across Europe and around the world.
Now, the Handel campaign has called you naive where Iran is concerned for supporting the Iran nuclear deal. The president had been in the Middle East and now in Rome and trying to make common cause with Sunni Saudi Arabia and Israel against a common enemy, he says, in Iran. So where should we go with all this? Because it's complicated. Iran is supporting, as you know, the Iraqi government that we're also supporting.
Well, Iran is a major state sponsor of terrorism and an avowed enemy of Israel. My argument is that Iran's commitments to restrict uranium enrichment must be uncompromisingly and strictly monitored and enforced. If Iran fails to live up to its obligations to restrict enrichment, then sanctions should snap back swiftly and aggressively in a way that punishes the Iranian economy. And furthermore, if Iran continues to test ballistic missiles in violation of UN Security Council resolutions, additional sanctions should be imposed.
Wouldn't it be hard, though, to get those sanctions to snap back once other countries are doing business with Iran?
Well, the design of the nuclear agreement is such that those sanctions can be reapplied swiftly. It's important that the U.S. Treasury Department be prepared to lead an effort to reimpose them in the event our intelligence community or the International Atomic Energy Agency report that Iran's not complying with its obligations.
Okay. I want to talk about policy, but also the politics of this race, if you don't mind. So let me ask you, changing the subject, why do you think people from around the country are spending millions of dollars on this campaign, and your campaign in particular?
Well, look, I can speak to what I'm hearing here in the district, and that is a desire for fresh leadership, for greater accountability in Congress and in the federal government, dismay with the level of disarray and dysfunction and gridlock and waste that plague Washington, a desire to see something different, and I'm offering that kind of fresh leadership to voters across the district.
Now, as you know, this has been a Republican district since 1979. Mitt Romney won by 23 points in 2012, Tom Price reelected by 24 as recently as November, but Donald Trump only by 1.5 points over Hillary Clinton in the 6th district. If this is a referendum on the president, as some people are suggesting, why should a moderate Republican who's not crazy about him vote for you instead of Karen Handel?
Well, growing up here, I never found it to be a particularly partisan place. I think folks want decent, effective, hardworking, energetic representation that'll work across the aisle to get things done, to cut wasteful spending, tackle the deficit, and set the right priorities, research and development, higher education and infrastructure.
Well, let me ask you this. And it's certainly no crime to be young. I wish I were 30 myself again. But if my math is correct, you were in high school when Karen Handel was the chair of the Fulton County Commission. She went on to hold statewide office. So why do you feel like you're more qualified for this job than she is?
Well, with all due respect to my opponent, looking at the gridlock and dysfunction and partisanship in Washington, I think the last thing that we need in Congress is another career politician. I've got 5 years of experience as a congressional aide working on defense and national security policy, earned a top secret security clearance from the Department of Defense. I'm a small business owner who specializes in exposing organized crime and political corruption. I'll bring that experience, those skills, and a fresh perspective to work across the aisle to get things done and to serve this community.
Okay. You had that top secret security clearance. It's true, but for about 5 months. Have you oversold that at all, do you think?
Never, not once. What I've stated consistently is that I was a national security aide for 5 years, and that I earned a top secret security clearance from the Department of Defense.
Okay. I asked Karen Handel to respond to the ad that you've had out there by a OBGYN in Cobb County about her efforts when she was at Susan G. Komen to defund Planned Parenthood, and that in the OBGYN's estimation this was unforgivable. She said, what I find unforgivable is Jon Ossoff, like so many liberals out there, using women as a wedge issue for the sake of politics. I'd like to ask, what has Jon Ossoff done in the fight against breast cancer? What do you say?
Here's what I can't quite wrap my head around, with all due respect to Secretary Handel. She took this job at the Susan G. Komen Foundation, an organization committed to fighting breast cancer, knowing that Planned Parenthood and breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood were a key partnership for the foundation. She went into that job and then led the effort to defund breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood. So I suppose my question, I think the question many are asking is, why did she take the job in the first place?
Yeah, she claimed that if I read it correctly, that it really wasn't even about abortion ultimately, but...
Well, exactly. It's about breast cancer screenings for women. And my argument is that women should be free to determine when and where they access health care services like breast cancer screenings.
Okay. You're aware, I guess, that there aren't any Planned Parenthood clinics in the 6th District, right?
Well, there's one in Marietta that serves many residents of the 6th District, and Planned Parenthood clinics serve men and women across Georgia.
Right. Let's talk about health care. The promises of Obamacare, that you could keep your doctor if you liked your doctor, keep your plan if you liked your plan, turned out not to be true. Why are the Republicans wrong to start from scratch on this?
Well, there are all kinds of problems with the Affordable Care Act. And what we need is for folks in Washington to work together to fix what's broken and strengthen what works, to get more folks covered at better prices with higher quality of care. And I'll work with anyone to achieve those ends. But what the House of Representatives has seen fit to do is to pass a bill that would throw more than 20 million Americans off of their health insurance, that would deny protections to folks with pre-existing conditions, and increase premiums. I think it's because career politicians are driven by partisan motives rather than the public interest.
But you know the premiums have been going up anyway, putting some people who technically have access to health care out of the market simply because they can't afford it or the deductible.
Premiums are out of control, and that's why I'll go to Washington to work across the aisle, for example, to introduce greater competition into the insurance market so that folks here in Georgia can consider and buy plans from around the country. Because like in any market, if folks have more choices, if there's more competition, then that'll drive down prices and drive up quality.
So bottom line, you think that Obamacare can still be fixed?
I think we need to work on a bipartisan approach to improving the laws on the books, not a rigid ideological partisan approach, and not...
That's all there seems to be in Washington at the moment.
And that's why we need some fresh leadership and fewer career politicians in Congress.
Let me ask you about tax reform. The markets have been on a roll since November in the president's election. It would seem in part because some investors are anticipating tax reform, particularly a reduction in corporate taxes. Where do you come down on all that?
Well, what I hear from entrepreneurs across the district and what I know as a small business owner myself is that what small businesses and medium-sized businesses need is certainty, efficiency, and simplicity. And I will work with anyone in Washington to try to achieve those goals for our business community here in Georgia, and particularly to try to achieve tax relief for small and medium-sized businesses.
Do you think corporate taxes are too high right now in the United States?
I think that if we can reduce corporate tax rates for small and medium-sized businesses by, for example, eliminating subsidies and carve-outs and special treatment that larger organizations and trade groups with lobbyists have secured in the tax code, that'd be a big win for this community.
Okay. Former FBI Director James Comey says President Trump pressured him to drop the investigation into former National Security Advisor General Michael Flynn. Trump says it didn't happen. Who are you inclined to believe on that one?
Well, we need a full, independent, and importantly, a transparent investigation of the facts, both with respect to Russian interference in the U.S. election and any improper disclosures of classified information to the Russian government, and any efforts potentially to interfere with ongoing FBI investigations of those matters.
Well, we've had a lot of time to watch Donald Trump as candidate and now as president. Do you think he's a person of integrity?
Well, I have the highest respect for the office. I don't have great admiration for the man himself, but my earnest hope is that he'll exercise sound judgment, that those around him will guide this administration in a direction that serves the American people.
What do you think he should be doing differently, specifically, in his conduct of the office?
Well, I think that the atmosphere of disarray and gridlock and dysfunction and chaos in Washington doesn't serve the American people. And it's not just this administration or this White House, it's career politicians in Congress who are driven by partisan motives rather than the public interest. That's why I'm offering some fresh leadership and a commitment to getting things done rather than more of the same from career politicians.
The new U.S. Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, has ordered prosecutors around the country to go for the maximum for whatever drug crimes they happen to be prosecuting, which is a change in approach from the Obama administration. And I take it not the way you would do things. What's your take on that?
Well, look, we've got organized crime, transnational crime, arms trafficking, white-collar crime, violent crime, rape, human trafficking rampant in this country. And yet we spend billions and billions of dollars locking up nonviolent drug offenders. I think that our priorities are out of whack. What I'll do is work to resource task forces at the Department of Justice and at the National Security Council and the White House to crack down on major international organized crime and high-level crime that has many victims here in the United States.
All right. Tell us about your documentary film business.
Sure. Well, my company specializes in the investigation of organized crime, political corruption, and war crimes. We sent a crew, for example, last year to the front line in northern Iraq, where they embedded with an all-female infantry unit under Kurdish command. Some of these women themselves had been captives of ISIS and were taking up arms in self-defense. We've exposed dozens of corrupt judges by secretly filming them. In West Africa, we've exposed quack doctors and surgeons who kill and mutilate women in Colombia and Nigeria, and we've exposed corrupt foreign officials who steal U.S. taxpayer-funded aid.
So is this a nonprofit business? You making money doing this?
No, it's a small business, and we do business with clients all over the world, selling content to international television broadcasters. We also produce some feature-length documentary films, and when I was asked to come and run this company, it had already won 2 Emmy Awards, 3 Emmy nominations, a Peabody Award, and a Columbia DuPont Award for its journalism.
How about that? What was the highlight of your time as a congressional aide for Congressman Johnson?
Well, I think there was no greater honor than serving the men and women in uniform who were deployed overseas or at sea and needed support from the Department of Defense, and working to serve the veterans here in Metro Atlanta who too often suffer from 6, 8, 12-month delays in responsiveness from the VA. My congressional office will be committed to supporting those veterans and making sure that our armed forces, the service personnel, get the respect and responsiveness they need.
Okay. Let's come back and talk about the race. Karen Handel says that she thinks that the Republicans who split their vote on April 18th are going to come together on June 20th and get across the finish line. What's your take on all that, and the turnout in particular?
Well, I think that folks are less interested in partisanship and more interested in fresh leadership. There are more than 10,000 volunteers working on my campaign, and they're Republicans, Independents, Democrats who look at what's happening in Washington and I think are hungry for fresh leadership and a commitment to accountability.
Yeah, they're calling me on the phone all the time and filling up my mailbox. Good thing I recycle. I mean, I guess the whole point of this is to get people in the middle of the summer when it may not necessarily be. I mean, obviously this race has been top of mind for everybody, but is it going to be difficult, do you think, to get people out in the middle of June when summer vacation's in full swing? Well,
as you know, a special election is all about energy and enthusiasm and momentum, and we're going to work as hard as we've ever worked. Reach out with humility and respect to voters across the district of every background, of every political persuasion, making the case for fresh leadership.
5,000 people have registered to vote just this month after the judge reopened voter registration. I'm guessing you're obviously aware of that. Do you have any sense of who those folks are? Have you been beating the bushes to get people to register since that opportunity was made available?
I know the campaign and our volunteers have been working to make sure that everyone's voice can be heard. And I encourage everyone in this district, everyone in this community, whether or not they support me, regardless of their party or persuasion, to make their voices heard in this election and every election.
Yeah, I've heard you say several times that you don't feel like this is a particularly partisan area. But if that were so, how does Tom Price win by 24 points, 6 months ago? What is it that you think is going on that has made your race so competitive and convinced people in California and elsewhere that it's worth spending their money, in the sense that this has been, again, such a reliably Republican district?
Well, look, I grew up in this community, and I don't think it's a particularly partisan community. I think that it's a community of decent, kind people who want effective representation. And with so much disarray in Washington, with career politicians having failed us for so many decades, I think that there's some genuine excitement about sending some fresh leadership to Washington. And I'm reaching out with humility and respect to everybody and making the case that I'll serve them well.
I appreciate you coming.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jon.